Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War belated news update, first part thereof for the 17th of August 2025. It's belated because I had a frontline update. I hadn't done a frontline update for 12 days, and so it took me an hour to go through all the changes, and there's quite a lot going on as well. And yeah, apologies for that, although you had some content, a pretty comprehensive update for what's going on along the front lines there, so go and check that out if you have the time. Remember, you can put me on 1.75 times speed to get through my waffling at a greater pace. Just press a cog on the YouTube video and you can adapt the speed, change the speed. Get used to me at 1.25, move it up to 1.5, and eventually 1.75 is probably where you're at. I know some of you don't like speeding up videos, but if there's nothing you've thought about before, think about it and you get through more content. More information can filter through your brain on a daily basis. Okay, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them linked below. I think my description maker is not working at the moment, so who knows. 900 personnel lost at over the last 24 hours is below the 1,000 threshold, so it's lower than what we are somewhat used to. 4 tanks and 8 troop-carrying AFVs. Those are low numbers again, although AFVs have ticked up slightly, but it's still way below the daily average. In fact, I imagine the daily average is probably coming back down given the last 2 months of activity. That shows, I think, the Ukrainians are being met not so much with tanks and AFVs as with SUVs and motorcycles, although there are only 88 vehicles and fuel tanks on the loss list today, so considerably fewer vehicles in total. 49 artillery systems lost, so that's almost double the daily average. That's a pretty good haul in that number, as in that category as well. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Good to see an anti-aircraft warfare system on there. I kind of like split between whether, if I don't see something, I think that's bad, but then it's good because it could mean that none of them are left. And if I do see some, I'm like, excellent, good to see them taking that out, and then I think, oh, that means they've got some left, type thing. So, you know, always kind of checking my thoughts. Right, we'll do a little bit of personnel first. So a Russian general, this is just out, was badly injured last night in Kursk region, losing both his legs, according to Russian war reporters. So this is a translation from a Russian source. Last night in the Kursk region, the Russian army lost another general. He's alive but in serious condition, traumatic amputation of an arm and part of a leg. So that's not both legs, that's an arm and a leg. We are waiting details. We hope the officials will not try to hide this information as they once did with Gudkov. The injured person is receiving all necessary medical care. So that is potentially a good strike for the Ukrainians in terms of a high-ranking Russian there, a Russian general. Now, we don't have an Andrew Perpetual loss list, but we do have a production of a Oryx loss list or two here. The Russian loss is 30 for the Russians, 6 for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians losing a Bushmaster, an Onsilla, a 122mm Gvozdika self-propelled gun, and then the rest are a couple of drones and a Ural truck. So really, I'd say 4 bits of kit there. 30 here for the Russians, a couple of tanks, 4 MTLBs, BMPs. In fact, so we've got 1 BMP2 and 3 BMP3s, and this again falls in line with what I've been saying. You're going to see more BMP3s on the list. They're the only ones they now continue to make. BMP2s are more recent. BMP1s, they've cycled through, I think, all of those that are able to be refurbished, and now you're going on to what they can build new. An MTLB, couple of bits of artillery, a Su-30 SM multi-role aircraft. Is that the one that was lost in the Black Sea on the way to Snake Island? I presume so. There were some claims that the plane, debris from the plane was on the surface of the water, but I've not seen any imagery of that, but it was claimed, so maybe Oryx has seen that, because I don't think they'd just go on the intercept of the Ukrainian, of the Russian comms saying that they'd lost one. And you got 5 Ural trucks and 3 Kamaz trucks, so 8 trucks there lost in total. That's good news. So the equipment losses look beneficial for Ukraine, according to Oryx. Of course, Oryx doesn't include civilian losses and ATVs. So motorcycles, SUVs, buggies, all that kind of stuff. That's what you'll see on Andrew Perpetual's list. Okay, Then we have the Ukrainian General Staff reporting that from August the 4th to the 16th, so 12 days of fighting, units of National Guard and Armed Forces, part of the 1st NGU Azov Corps, cleared Hruzka, Rubizhne, Novovodyanye, Petrivka, Vesele, and Zoloty Kolodiaz in Donetsk Oblast. So this is essentially around, but not entirely, the salient, the sector, the bridgehead that the Russians had gained going north, those kind of two bunny ears up into the area of Zoloty Kolodiaz, breaking through, or at least reaching the main rear anti-tank ditch. So this is potentially really bad news. I mean, it's really bad news, but it wasn't catastrophic because actually the Ukrainians reacted in time that they couldn't pile in exploitation troops and mechanized equipment. However, they must have started to do that because some of the numbers here, now this isn't just for that sector though, this goes down to, like it mentions Rubizhne and other areas around it. And I was wondering in my frontline update whether these, so this was a panic time for the Ukrainians because they sent like six elements of 6 different units, decent troops sent into here to stop the deep reconnaissance and special forces guys getting a foothold, and then stop the Russians sending in those extra troops and mechanized equipment. They were starting to do that, and I think that's what underwrites this. But the question is, are the Ukrainian troops sent in there going to clear the wider bridgehead north of Pokrovks? Is it just going to be that thin DRG attack into the rear lines, or are they going to actually be brought against the major Russian push north of Pokrovsk, that is ending up surrounding Pokrovsk on now 3 sides? And if they continue doing that, then that is a major force being put against the Russians. And some people say, well, better that than doing whatever else they're going to do, because Pokrovsk is key. You don't want Russia to get the PR of winning over Pokrovsk, and you want to clear out the northern sector there. But whatever activity, however far this stretches, these troops, they've now killed 910 and wounded 335. So that's a massive number of people. It isn't just kind of DRG people getting behind the lines. You would have thought 100 or so there. Now, I guess the Russians were like, well, hey, we've broken through, let's send in our peeps. And the Ukrainians are like, whoa, they're broken through, let's send in our peeps. And then bash. But the Ukrainians sent in really good troops and probably caught the Russians off guard as much as the Russians caught the Ukrainians off guard. And they've captured 37. So the enemy lost significant equipment. So this equipment, although it's not like tremendous amounts of kit, considering I think it's now stretching beyond that bridgehead, it does show that I think the Russians were rushing in extra troops and equipment. So 8 tanks, 6 armored combat vehicles, 103 SUVs, motorcycles, buggies, and that kind of stuff. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 18 artillery pieces. So the Ukrainians must be using drones, I think, to go back further. 91 drones. I presume those are not just not FPV drones, but I don't know. I presume it's going to be things like reconnaissance drones and Lancets and whatnot. Stabilization operations near Dobropilia, Donetsk Oblast continue. Russian forces continue to surrender. 19th Army Corps in Donetsk Oblast has captured 6 Russian soldiers in the past day. This week, the 7th Assault Corps and supporting units cleared Pokrovsk of enemy groups and individual soldiers. So not only around Pokrovsk, but in Pokrovsk, there have been infiltration of Russian troops. I reported this over the last couple of days. They've now been cleared out of Pokrovsk. Some of them have been wearing civvies, sort of taking off their uniform and wearing civilian clothes. Yesterday, Ukrainian units advanced in North Slobozhansky direction. So this is now going up to Sumy Oblast. And there are claims that they've taken 1,000 meters near Yablunivka. And actually, there are other claims that they've taken maybe 2 kilometers or so. In fact, we might as well talk about that now. Ukrainian troops advance in Sumy. General Staff says Ukraine's military has reportedly advanced about 2 kilometers in Sumy just a day after Putin and Trump discussed a deal that would give unoccupied Ukrainian territories to Russia. Some details of what the General Staff are claiming. Now, this is an interesting one because I have been wondering about this. I've reported to you some claims that they are making like 300 T-90s a month. And many of you are like, not sure about that. And I likewise were like, I think that is a very charitable interpretation of what they're building. Then there's a question of whether they're building them from new, or are they upgrading previous T-90s, or are they refurbishing what's going on? What does this really mean? And Euromine Press has taken this question and run with it. How many T-90M tanks is Russia building? 300 or just 10? NATO's asking for a friend. The analysis community's best guesses range from almost none to a lot, which isn't much help for military planning. And I completely agree. So I have seen some very charitable analyses, but from some fairly reputable people, and even sometimes, Jack Watling and people from Russia, you think, oh, you're a little bit charitable to what the Russians are doing there. Not that I should know any better, right? But you just get a sense of things. Russia's building hundreds of new T-90M tanks a year, enough to rebuild some of the battle tank regiments and establish an armoured reserve. And this is what's been claimed, that actually they aren't going to the front line, they're just keeping them in reserve for Russia's wider war on Ukraine or for some future war against NATO. That's a conclusion of a recent study by the pro-Ukraine conflict intelligence team. And that's the one that I reported last time, where some of you are like, no, that's way too charitable. But there's a problem. According to one expert, CIT is wrong. Sergio Miller, an analyst and former British Army intelligence officer, believes Russia's struggling to complete even 100 T-90Ms a year. And most of those it does complete are revamped T-90As, so upgraded tanks from the other variant of the T-90. So the T-90A, and you got the T-90S, which is an export variant, and then you got the T-90M, which is the upgraded breakthrough. That's what it's called, the breakthrough tank. Rather than all new vehicles. It's unclear, based on available public evidence, who is right, CIT's experts or Miller. But it matters. The scores of tanks CIT believes Russia is producing, that Miller thinks are vaporware, are enough to equip at least one armoured regiment every year. The 51-tank 3-person T-90M is heavily armoured and boasts modern optics and a powerful 135mm main gun. It's one of the best tanks in the world. Has there been a dramatic fall-off in tank production at Russia's Uralvagonzavod tank factory in Sverdlovsk Oblast, 1,600 kilometers from Ukraine, to borrow Hambling's phrasing, or is Uralvagonzavod churning out fresh tanks at a rate faster than any tank factory in a Western country? According to our estimates, Uralvagonzavod produced 60 to 70 T-90M tanks in 2022, CIT reported. In 2023, amid efforts to mobilize the defense industry, output may have increased to 140 to 180 tanks, and by 2024, it may have surpassed 200 units annually, possibly approaching a production rate of 250 to 300 tanks per year. Now, there's a lot of, I have to say, modals in there. There's a lot of may, some degree of probability, and not kind of like high-end probability. The word, I love it because I've not read this. So the word may is doing a lot of work here. Yep, exactly. But it's worth noting, oops, I don't know what's happened there. Great, thank you for that. Some annoying ad pop-up thing that got through. The word may is doing a lot of work here, but it's worth noting that CIT isn't alone in perceiving an increasing rate of tank production. A few months ago, Czech analyst Jakub Janovsky, he's from Oryx, in fact, who did the two lists we just looked at, concluded Uralvagonzavod has been building between 150 and 200 T-90Ms annually. For comparison, the US Army's own tank plant in Ohio, operated by General Dynamics Land Systems, has been producing just a few dozen M1 Abrams tanks annually, down from 90 a year in the early 2020s. To be fair to the Americans, they're not mired in a costly war, and they plan to boost Abrams production with the introduction of a new variant in the coming years. At the same time, the Russian military has shifted to infantry-led assaults in Ukraine and now deploys and loses just a few tanks every month. That shift means any fresh tanks Russia produces through new production or by fetching old Cold War tanks from long-term storage and upgrading them can go towards replacing the roughly 4,000 tanks the Russians have lost in Ukraine. Unless the fighting in Ukraine shifts back to mechanized operations, this restored tank corps can be held in reserve for future conflicts. So there you go. T-90 production may be free-falling, or it may not be, and it's quite difficult to know who is right here. As it concludes, we may not know who's right about T-90M production unless and until Russia either redeploys tanks to Ukraine in large numbers or launches an armoured assault on NATO's eastern flank. Maybe it's best not to know for now. Well, I think it is best to know. Knowledge is power. So there you go. Now, I've talked about this before. Some people have questioned the efficacy of using assault UGVs, I think you're going to see more and more of them. They're going to be set to replace humans as much as possible from a Ukrainian point of view. They cannot get boots on the ground in the way that Russia can. And even Russia is, I think, somewhat struggling. They are scraping every barrel to get those boots on the ground. But according to Russians, they are ahead of their schedule for recruitment this year. Robot machine gunners almost at close range knocked out Russians from the breakthrough zone in Pokrovks direction near Dobropilya. So those teams that we were talking about, the units we were talking about previously, were apparently using, as well as their own troops and drones and artillery and whatnot, using UGVs. So the airfield cleaned Vesele, where the Russian breakthrough was taking place, helped by the use of close ground support from UGVs with machine guns. Interesting. Russian Voronka here shows that the Ukrainians have destroyed a column on the Rilsk-Komitovka highway. So this is a highway north of where the Ukrainians are now. They've been pushed back to the border and indeed south into Sumy. This was a highway that was a kind of road of death previously, or it certainly run the gauntlet when the Ukrainians were as far north of Koronovo and a little bit further north. They could reach here with drones. I don't know what they're reaching now, and they're evidently, I presume, using drones, but what drones they're using, because I would have thought it would be beyond the ability of 15-kilometer FPV drones. Are they using FPV drones from a mothership with a repeater? Are they using longer range strike drones like the HF-1 or German-produced drones? I don't know, but we are seeing quite a lot of destruction there in that video. Here we see a bridge that's already been destroyed. This is I think just across the Sumy border into Kursk. The 47th Mechanized Brigade shared a video of the destruction of a Russian truck that is towing an artillery piece, which tried to cross a destroyed bridge over a river. I think it probably got stuck. The truck was then destroyed by either an AQ-100 bayonet or an HF-1, of which Germany has so far officially delivered 1,950 units to Ukraine. This is a drone that is using AI targeting, I believe. They're now going to be replacing that with the HQ-2? So they've already got 1,950 of the first kind of version, and they're going to be receiving more of an upgraded variant that could well be doing a decent job. What else do we have? HUR, or the GUR, they report that a strike on a Russian ammunition depot and personnel in occupied Melitopol, Zaporizhia, has occurred, causing the explosion of a truck as it arrived with troops. At least 6 Russian Marines and a Kadyrovite, so it's probably an Akhmat or someone, drone crew were killed. So drone crew and 6 Russian Marines. So this is really good success for the Ukrainians. Secondary detonations and ambulance responses followed. I don't know what that was, whether it's sabotage or a mine that had been dropped or what. But good news for the Ukrainians. Here there's a video, fairly, I don't know, some people might not find it too interesting, but Andrew Perpetua says this is important. So these are pieces of comms equipment. We often see comms equipment on Andrew Perpetua's loss list. Some are more important than others. These are important comms, like they're all important, but some are like little either Starlinks or little like mobile phone slightly larger than like a tablet size thing that aren't worth huge amounts. These are bigger ones on tripods or on masts and whatnot, and we've got a whole video of a selection of these getting taken out by the Ukrainians. This sort of video that casual observers think is stupid and pointless, but is actually a big accomplishment and very good. Andrew Perpetua says, cutting comms is never done, as David D replies. So yep, there's a video of that, and you can go and watch. I find this quite therapeutic. But here you have a whole video montage of the Belava unit operators dropping, I think, delayed fuse IEDs from drones on mines from a safe distance. And this is how they are demining, obviously, near the front line. So you get a drone, it comes along, drops, and then quickly scoots off because there's only like a 2-second delay, and then that blows up the mine. But there's a whole video of that happening, which is one way to demine an area. But of course, you know, you've got to spot those mines and etc. etc. Obviously, this came the case with any demining. Russian correspondent Sergei Shilov believes that Ukraine will massively cover frontline roads with net tunnels, and that Russia must as well. Roads of death, corridors of life. As you can see from this image, you have some serious netting along this road. I presume it's a Ukrainian road, and there are lots of images of this. Sometimes they get taken out, and if they're too near the front line, it becomes too difficult to fix them. But they are certainly proving their worth, otherwise they wouldn't still be making them. A vivid example of what drones are capable of in modern warfare is the Unikovka-Sucha route. Following the Kursk operation, there remain hundreds of burnt-out Ukrainian armed forces vehicles. So this will be as a result of this is when the Rubicon Russian unit started hitting supply routes for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians were unable to hold on to Kursk, and what was left or what happened was the Ukrainians lost quite a lot of equipment in that Kursk operation, and the very end of it wasn't quite as successful as the very beginning, shall we say. So these drone nets are super important. Here we have rare footage of a Ukrainian Air Force MiG-29 Falcon operating from an improvised highway airstrip, seen here taxiing outside a nearby homeowner's front gate. I mean, quite incredible footage. I mean, that's not the sort of thing I'd expect to see out my front door. A couple of dog walkers, but not a MiG-29. But there you go, taking off from an improvised highway there. Very significant, I think that is. And finally, we have, for this section, Russia on fire, hashtag Russia on fire. A big blaze, and this was big last night. This was reported quite widely from a number of places. Russian media reporting this. A big blaze developed in the capital. So this is in Moscow. It's at the Sherbinka district of Moscow, still quite far from the center, but a fairly significant blaze. Early reports indicate it was a bookmaker's, a gambling office in the southern district of Moscow. Arson's not being ruled out. Some members of the public think people may still be inside at the time. But yeah, that was quite a major blaze. I think it might spread as well. Okay, so now we are on to distant strikes, and I don't have too much information. A couple of fairly quiet nights on both sides, really. Ukrainian air defense shot down 40 out of the 60 Russian drones that were sent in, and a single Iskander-M ballistic missile got through. 1 out of 1 was successful. Successful in getting through air defense. Don't know if it's successful in hitting what it intended, as we have heard that they're not, the most accurate. So 40 out of 61, I think quite a lot of drones were sent into pretty much the frontline areas, and that's why, again, struggling to get above 2/3 interception there. Right, what did I don't know what was struck though, and very little do we know what the Ukrainians struck other than this. So drones struck Voronezh Oblast last night in Russia. The railway station in Lysky, a major hub of Russia's southeastern railway, was hit. RZD reports nearly a dozen trains were delayed. It looked like a fairly significant explosion there, caught on that camera, and caught on other videos as well. Quite a lot of burning and smoking there. At night, drones attacked the Lysky railway station in the Voronezh region. It's considered one of the largest railway junctions of the southeastern railway. Now, we have seen a concerted effort by the Ukrainians to attack Russian railway logistics over the last 2 months, and this will be just part of that continued project. I was expecting some really wide-scale Ukrainian attacks because they kind of took a night off for the Alaska summit, and they haven't really ramped it up, so maybe they are just operating at max at the moment. Reports tonight, or they're stockpiling, reports tonight that a Russian substation has been hit by a drone attack in Belgorod. So that happened at Exal Nova, geolocated it to just outside Rakitnoy village, some 30 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. So substation was hit there. And then we hear today in the Belgorod region, again, August the 17th. So today, large shopping centres, markets and amusement parks will temporarily suspend operations, said the head of the region, Vyacheslav Gladkov. The governor explained the restrictive measures by the difficult situation in the border area of the Belgorod region and regular attacks by Ukrainian armed forces drones. I don't know what's going on there, but Belgorod's shutting down quite a lot of commercial enterprises. And just a general analysis, since there's not a great deal of news, let's go to the analyst who says, momentum syndrome, why Ukraine has what Russia doesn't. There are many who keep saying that Russia has momentum on the front lines, and that's why they continue to advance, albeit at a snail's pace and at huge cost. Momentum is where you gain forward movement because the speed you have advanced pushes you forward. You can take your foot off the pedal and momentum will carry you onward. Most notably, if you accelerate down a hill and go up the other side, you can feel it as you gain acceleration. Where is there even a single sign Russia has any momentum in this war? Anyone even suggesting it is strategically and tactically blind. Even in strategic warfare, Russia, with its attacks on civilians, lacks the invisible force, because even though they fire more drones, their effects aren't changing anything on the ground. They are not having any practical strategic impact. The same can't be said for Ukraine's drone war on Russia. Oil refineries they were just about fixing are now in ruins again. Domestic fuel prices in Russia are at an all-time high. The momentum from that pushing inflation higher. Gunpowder plants, electronics factories, radio equipment plants, optical sites factories, and a myriad of other manufacturing sites are being taken out day after day. Airfields hit, bombers destroyed, rail lines and key staging areas wiped out, fuel storage and distribution hit. All of this combined creates a momentum that drives deep into the military manufacturing economy and its resources. The oil export business is being hit, pipelines and export terminals, pumping stations. And we know something has happened in the wider Russian oil industry, as OPEC Plus reported this week that Russia has been unable to meet its export quotas of 15% of OPEC Plus production, managing just 12.5% for 2 straight months. Ukraine has the best kill ratio. Its ability to be flexible creates its own momentum. When the old Russian larder starts another offensive, that stalls as more men die sent to the meat grinder. There's no real consistency to Russian advances anymore. They claim this and that, but there's no front-wide momentum or even acceleration. They say they're planning this and that, but it doesn't materialize, not all at once, because they just don't have what it takes materially to make that happen. And this is because the momentum on Ukraine's side has been about pouring more energy into stopping them. Their momentum is they push hard to blunt the efforts of a clumsy and incompetent Russian army. Russia has no momentum. It's an old Soviet car they can't get new parts for, a stop and start experience, consuming manpower unable to sustain a crawl for long. It has no way of winning. It's a very charitable interpretation of what's going on. I broadly agree, although I will put some caveats on. We don't always know the success Russia has in hitting Ukraine's industrial military complex. And I think when you got 20 drones getting through last night, how many of them just hit residential buildings? It's hard to know. How many hit military targets? Hard to know. How many hit the military industrial complex? When we see large scale strikes on western Ukraine, Lviv, and although we haven't seen that for a few weeks, it has to be said, but when they were doing some of those really huge attacks, we were seeing Ivano-Frankivsk, we were seeing Lviv, and other places in the West get hammered. And I think we can be confident that the Russians will have hurt Ukrainian industrial capacity. But I think that in general, the Ukrainians do a better job. And they are really hurting the Russian hydrocarbons industry. And I think drone production as well as other, missile production. We are not seeing huge numbers of missiles sent. We're not seeing huge numbers of drones being sent. So if we look at the Dell stats again, just to get a sense of what the numbers are. Now, these are only interceptions. They aren't the full set of drones or cruise missiles sent on a given day. We have, if I get the right place here, we have definitely a drop off. So we can see a slight shallowing off. Let's make it a marginally bigger here, so you can see. It is marginal to some degree, but I think it's more significant than that. We are not seeing the huge drone numbers that we saw at the top here. We've now dropped down. And I think you're going to start to, you see the green line. There are different kind of this. There's 7. I presume that's a 7-day moving average rather than a poly moving average. So you can see that green line coming down there. It is, I think, a precipitous fall in Russian drone usage. That would be okay for the Russians if they then had a massive attack. But we just haven't seen that. You would have expected one. Maybe a week ago, maybe 2 even, but we weren't simply not seeing that. So then when we go to cruise missiles, Let's see at the number of huge cruise missile attacks. Well, you have to go back all the way to here to see anything over 100. And that was, well, let's have a look, 2024, November 2024. Right, we are 9 months on from that, 8 months on from that, 9 months on for that. And these are the cruise missile numbers that okay, albeit intercepted, but that gives you an indication of how many are thrown in there. And the most we're seeing these days is something like 50, and even then, not for some time. So just 40 sometime back, and then actually more recently, none here. So I really think the Ukrainians have done a good job. They really have, of hitting Russian supply chains that are involved in the manufacturing of both Shahed drones and cruise and ballistic missiles. Now, maybe I'll be proven wrong if there's a massive attack by the Russians over the next couple of days, but I don't know. Right, we're going to go on to and we don't see too many of these days, UK intelligence update. This one says, it's been reported that Russian President Putin has reiterated long-standing maximalist demands. So this is Alaska. I'm going to do a separate Alaska update video. Yes, there is more to be said about it. He reiterated his maximalist demands regarding Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, including for the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the 4 internationally recognized Ukrainian oblasts of Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson. We're hearing from Reuters today that really Donald Trump was just reiterating Russia's maximalist demands. Like, he was just completely sucked in. Lots of theories about what went on. There's talk about some of the aides, including Caroline Levitt, being like almost looking frightened. Jake Bro's done an interesting piece on there being a body double, and that actually it might be Lavrov that was really leading things, and that's why there was a 3-on-3, that actually Putin's body double is good for saying a few things, speaking it from the podium, but in terms of negotiating, Lavrov was the one, especially when you understand the theory is the real Putin is a germaphobe, and still has people kind of sprayed for COVID and whatnot, and meets people from the other end of the very long table. That's not the guy that we see going to Crimea. That's not the guy that we see going to Buryatia and literally in throngs of crowds kissing people. There are 2 Putins. There's even Evil Gherkin, Igor Strelkov, has said that there are 2 Putins. One that sits, and he made this sign with binoculars from the end of the table, and he was in the FSB, Strelkov, and fought for the Ukrainians and was part of the administration for Luhansk, Donetsk. After 2014, so he would know. So he's recognizing there are body doubles, and it could be that dynamic threw things in Alaska. I don't know. There are some people saying that Putin might not even have gone to Alaska. There's some people suggesting he wouldn't turn up, but the one that turned up certainly looked somewhat different to the other Putin, and Jake Bro does a good analysis of that. But anyway, so the US ends up regurgitating Russian maximalist demands, including the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson. The idea was that the Ukrainians give the Russians the rest of Donetsk, and then they freeze the lines elsewhere, is one of the options. Based on the rate of Russia's incremental battlefield advances. Oh, sorry, just to add to that, we understand as well that Putin said to Trump that, we're easily going to get Donetsk, don't worry about that. So, in other words, he convinced Trump that Ukraine should just give Russia Donetsk because they're just going to take it anyway like that. That actually it's going to be forthcoming in the next days and weeks and whatnot. But of course, they've been trying to take Donetsk since 2014. So, if you don't know what's going on in the war, you go, oh, okay, yeah, right, oh, right, yeah. If you know what's going on in the war, you know damn well the Russians are unable to take Donetsk, and they're finding it bloody difficult. In fact, they've just had one potentially good sector dismantled by Ukrainian troops coming in. So, absolutely not. But if Trump knows no better, he'll have no knowledge with which to veto that demand or fact check that claim. So based on the rate of Russia's incremental battlefield advances so far in 2025, it would take Russian forces approximately 4.4 more years to gain 100% of the 4 Ukrainian oblasts' territory. Based on Russia's average daily casualty rate in 2025 so far, as reported by Ukrainian General Staff, 4.4 more years would lead to approximately 1,930,000 further Russian casualties, killed and wounded. This is in addition to the approximately 1,060,000 casualties Russia has already likely sustained since launching the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, including around 250,000 killed or missing, presumed dead. Russia announced the illegal and erroneous annexation of the 4 internationally recognized Ukrainian oblasts, including those areas under Ukrainian control, in September 2022, contradicting Russia's own formal recognition of Ukraine's independence and sovereignty following the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that's a good, interesting intelligence update from the British there. So the Hudson Institute was warned that Moscow's war effort rests on very fragile arteries. This is fascinating. So from the Volga-Don Canal and Shahed drone factory at Crimea's bridges, China-Russia rail routes, Transnistria and even Pacific Fleet bases each presents Ukraine with a pressure point. In other words, and I've said this about Tatarstan, about the drone factory there, that's like number one target. But it looks like they're also taking out some of the supply chain to that factory, because it's a long way away. It's very difficult to hit. But there are other pressure points that Ukraine can achieve, can target here. So the Hudson Institute says the Volga-Don Canal is a lifeline between the Caspian and the Black Sea. So that's going to be there, I presume, the Volga-Don Volga-Don Canal. I don't know if you can see that. There's a Caspian Sea, there's a Black Sea, but it allows cargo to be shipped there, including maybe even naval vessels. The Shahed drone plant in Tatarstan, up to 190 drones per day. China-Russia rail routes as well. 90% of imports move by train. Crimea's bridges, the Kerch, the Chonhar, the Sivash, and the Henichesk, all of which have been previously targeted. So we get these particular weaknesses there. All of these have been targeted previously with success. Storm Shadows, when they received them, were, I think, used against those bridges. There's the canal, the Volga-Don Canal. And there's the Alabuga manufacturing facility, the Special Economic Zone. You've also got Nizhnekamsk, which is a kind of logistics hub for those drones. It actually has a Chinese name. What else? We have Western Russian rail bridges, 30,000 tons of cargo a day cross them. Abkhazia naval base, which is under construction, it's has weak supply. Okay, so we've got some, we're going to come on to talk about this in a second. So the eastern seaboard of Russia has these naval bases, which are potentially weak. You got the Rybachi submarine base that was potentially going to hurt as a result of the earthquake in Kamchatka recently. It got away with it, luckily. Transnistria is another weakness. You've got 1,500 Russian troops there, and a ton of an absolute ton of ammunition. I mean, both sides would really like access to that. And you've got this port in Abkhazia called Ochamchira, which is going to be the replacement to Sevastopol, effectively, and Novorossiysk. Novorossiysk is not deep enough. It is not a deep water port. Sevastopol is, but Sevastopol is too vulnerable. So they're building this one in Abkhazia, which is an annexed Georgian region. Abkhazia naval base under construction, weak supply. Then you got the Transnistria garrison in the annexed area of Moldova, 1,500 isolated troops and a lot of ammo. Pacific Fleet bases as well are far away, but they are lightly defended. So there are, quite a few options for the Ukrainians to hit. The analysis concludes disrupting these choke points would cripple Russia's logistics and weaken its control over occupied areas. Interesting analysis there. Now, we hear that a Ukrainian NGO has identified 144 Russian prison guards involved in Ukrainian POW torture. I mean, information these days is so easy to come. I'm not saying it was easy to get those names, but like compared to, like, let's say, the Nuremberg trials and whatnot, it is evident, I think, that the Ukrainians are able to identify, whether it be Bellingcat or other here in this case it's Molfar Intelligence Institute, they are able to find names of people who have been involved in these horrific events, and they will be held to account after the war, one would presume. New public registry includes names, addresses, phones, and ID data. Quite incredible. And I was going to finish with a fascinating observation about St. Petersburg from someone's mother-in-law who is Russian, but he's asked me not to do it until she gets back to where she lives. That's not in Russia, so I won't do that. Anyway, in the meantime, I'll leave you with good news. Good news. It's not news at all. Thank you very much to Rick the Ukrainian, who sent me some patches. Dear Johnny, thank you for all your work to support the Ukrainian army. Love you, man. Live long and prosper, with love, Rick. So Rick the Ukrainian gave me a postcard, and I've got 3 badges that I'm going to attach to my display that is down there at the moment, because I need to find a place to put it on a wall, because I've got all my patches, additional patches to those ones over there. So thank you, Rick. You're an absolute legend. I have these 3 beautiful patches. I'm going to ask him again which units these refer to, so I have it in my head. But thank you, Rick. In the meantime, guys, you guys take care, and I will speak to you soon. Toodle pips.